Never assume your family will be there when you need them most. My story will prove exactly the opposite. I'm Madison, and what I'm about to share with you will change how you think about unconditional love forever. Because sometimes the people who should love you most will choose a dog over your dying breath. I was 24 when this happened, but the foundation for this nightmare was laid decades earlier. See, in my family, there were always two categories of people, Emma and everyone else. Emma was my older sister, 28, gorgeous, successful, and in my parents' eyes, absolutely perfect. Then there was me, Madison, the afterthought, who somehow managed to survive in Emma's shadow for over 2 decades. Growing up, I learned early that my needs would always come second. When I turned 8, my birthday party was cancelled because Emma had a college interview that same weekend. Madison will understand, Mum said, patting my head like I was the family pet. Emma's future is more important right now. I spent my 8th birthday eating gas station cupcakes while sitting in the car outside Emma's interview. When I made honour roll in high school, the certificate went straight to the junk drawer. When Emma made honour roll, they threw a dinner party and invited the neighbours. When I got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, Dad's response was, "Well, that's nice, honey. Did you remember to pick up Emma's dry cleaning?" When Emma got accepted to law school, they bought her a brand new car to celebrate. But the moment I truly understood my place in this family happened when I was 16. I woke up one night with the most excruciating pain I'd ever felt in my life. My appendix was rupturing and I was screaming in agony, doubled over on my bedroom floor. Mum found me there at 2 a.m, writhing and barely conscious. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Madison, what now?" She sighed like I was interrupting her sleep for fun. Dad drove me to the emergency room, but not before stopping by Emma's apartment first. "We need to let your sister know what's happening," he explained as I moaned in the back seat, feeling like my insides were being torn apart. Emma wasn't even home. She was on a date. But Dad insisted on waiting 20 minutes for her to call him back. By the time we reached the hospital, my appendix had fully ruptured. The surgeon later told my parents that another hour's delay could have killed me. Their response? Well, thank God Emma was safe. Not thank God I was alive. Thank God Emma was safe from the inconvenience of worrying about her little sister. I spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from emergency surgery. Emma visited once for about 15 minutes, complaining the entire time about how the hospital smell was making her nauseous, and she had a work presentation to prepare for. My parents took turns staying with me, but I could hear them on phone calls in the hallway, mostly discussing Emma's upcoming work projects and how this whole situation was affecting her stress levels. That's when it clicked for me. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a responsibility they'd never asked for, an obligation they fulfilled with minimal effort while saving all their real love and attention for Emma. I was the spare child, the backup plan, the one who existed to make Emma look even better by comparison. But somehow, despite understanding this dynamic, I kept trying. I kept hoping that maybe one day I'd do something impressive enough, be good enough, be sick enough, be desperate enough to earn their love. I was wrong, but I wouldn't learn just how wrong until I was literally dying. Fast forward 8 years. I was 24, living in my own apartment across town, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing company. I'd managed to build a decent life for myself, though I still made the mistake of trying to maintain a relationship with my family. I showed up for holidays, remembered birthdays, sent flowers on Mother's Day. I kept hoping that maybe as adults things would be different. They weren't. In fact, things had gotten worse because now there was Princess. Princess was Emma's golden retriever puppy. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this dog received more love, attention, and care than I had received in my entire 24 years of existence. Princess had her own Instagram account with 15,000 followers. Princess had a wardrobe that cost more than my monthly rent. Princess had health insurance, actual pet health insurance, that covered everything from routine checkups to experimental treatments. Princess had a savings account for her future needs. Princess had birthday parties with professionally catered dog treats and party hats for all the neighbourhood dogs. I know this because I was invited to Princess's first birthday party. Not invited as a beloved family member, but invited the way you'd invite a distant acquaintance. An afterthought invitation sent 3 days before the event with a casual, "Oh, you can come too, if you want." I watched my parents spend more money on Princess's birthday party than they'd spent on all of my birthdays combined. The worst part wasn't the money, though. It was the love. I watched my mother's face light up when Princess entered a room the same way I'd always hoped her face would light up when she saw me. I watched my father get down on the floor to play with Princess, baby talking to her in a voice I'd never heard him use with me. I watched Emma record Instagram stories about how Princess was the most precious member of our family. And I watched my parents share those stories with pride. Christmas that year was the final confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. I arrived at my parents' house right on time, carrying carefully chosen gifts for everyone. Mom answered the door with Princess in her arms, both of them wearing matching Christmas sweaters. "Oh, Madison, you're early," Mom said, not with happiness, but with mild irritation. Princess is still getting used to having people over. "Could you maybe wait in the kitchen while she settles in?" I spent the first hour of Christmas morning sitting alone in the kitchen while my parents and Emma cooed over Princess opening her presents, yes, the dog opened presents, in the living room. When I was finally allowed to join them, Princess was wearing a diamond collar that cost more than my car payment, and the floor was littered with expensive dog toys and gourmet treats. My parents had gotten me a $20 gift card to Target. Emma's gift to me was a book about finding your purpose in life, which felt like a not-so-subtle hint that I hadn't found mine yet. Her gift from Princess, because yes, the dog gave gifts, was a spa weekend at a luxury resort 2 hours away. When it was time to take family photos, I was asked to move out of the frame so Princess could sit between my parents. "Princess photographs better from this angle," Emma explained, adjusting the dog's position while I stood awkwardly to the side. The family Christmas card that year featured my parents, Emma, and Princess arranged beautifully on the couch. I wasn't in it. But the most painful moment came during dinner. We were all seated around the table, my parents, Emma, me, and Princess in her own chair with a special placemat. Dad was carving the turkey when he raised his glass for a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," he began, looking around the table. "Emma, you've made us so proud this year with your promotion. Princess, you've brought so much joy into our lives. And his eyes landed on me briefly, and I held my breath, hoping for some acknowledgement, some recognition that I was their daughter too. And thank you to Madison for the nice wine. That was it. I was thanked for bringing wine, like I was a family friend or a co-worker who'd stop by for dinner. Emma was celebrated for her achievements. Princess was celebrated for existing. I was thanked for my contribution to the bar. The rest of dinner continued with conversations about Emma's work, Princess's training progress, and upcoming family events that I wasn't included in planning. When Emma mentioned taking Princess to a dog-friendly winery the following weekend, Mum immediately offered to come along. "It'll be so fun, just us 3 girls," she said, meaning Emma herself and the dog. I wasn't invited. Later that evening, as I was helping clean up, I overheard Emma and Mom talking about Thanksgiving plans for the following year. "We should make sure wherever we go is princess friendly," Emma was saying. "She gets anxious in new environments." "Of course," Mum replied. "Princess's comfort is our top priority. We can always do something small with Madison separately if she wants." Something small, separately. That was my place in this family. An afterthought, a separate celebration, a consolation prize. I started having health problems around February. Nothing dramatic at first, just persistent fatigue, occasional dizziness, some unexplained weight loss. I mentioned it during one of my increasingly rare phone calls with my mother. "You're probably just stressed from work," she dismissed. "Have you tried yoga?" Emma swears by her yoga instructor. Of course, Emma doesn't get sick very often. She takes such good care of herself. The conversation quickly shifted to Princess's upcoming vet appointment for routine shots. Mum spent 20 minutes detailing Princess's vaccination schedule and dietary requirements, showing more concern for the dog's preventive health care than she'd shown for my actual symptoms. When the dizziness got worse, I mentioned it to Dad during one of Emma's Instagram worthy family dinners at their house. The monthly gatherings where I sat at one end of the table while Princess got the seat of honour next to Emma. "You should eat more red meat," Dad suggested without looking up from where he was hand-feeding Princess gourmet dog treats. "Iron deficiency, probably. Emma never has these problems because she's always been good about nutrition." I watched him carefully portion out Princess's dinner. Organic, grain-free, veterinarian approved. While dismissing my health concerns with a generic suggestion he'd probably heard on a TV commercial. By March, I was experiencing episodes where I'd suddenly feel faint and have to sit down wherever I was. My co-workers started noticing and expressing concern. My supervisor even suggested I take some time off to see a doctor. But when I mentioned these episodes to my family, the response was predictably indifferent. "Madison's always been dramatic about her health," I heard Mom tell someone on the phone when I was visiting. "Remember when she thought she had mono in college? It was just a regular cold. Some people just have lower tolerance for discomfort." Meanwhile, when Princess had mild stomach upset from eating something in the yard, it was a family emergency. Emma took the day off work, Mum cancelled her book club, and they spent 6 hours at the emergency animal clinic. Princess's stomach ache received more attention and concern than months of my increasingly serious symptoms. I should have known then what was coming. I should have realised that if my family couldn't be bothered to take my health seriously when I was conscious and standing right in front of them, they certainly weren't going to prioritise me in a real emergency. But I still had this naive hope, buried somewhere deep inside, that when it really mattered, when I really needed them, they'd prove they loved me after all. I was wrong. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late March. I had just finished a particularly demanding project at work and was feeling more exhausted than usual. I decided to leave a little early and treat myself to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, something I rarely did, but I was trying to practice better self-care since clearly no one else was going to care for me. I was walking to my car in the parking garage when the world started spinning, not the mild dizziness I'd been experiencing for weeks, but a violent, disorienting vertigo that made me grab onto the concrete wall for support. My vision was going in and out of focus, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I managed to reach my car and sit down in the driver's seat, thinking maybe I just needed to rest for a minute. But instead of getting better, I started feeling nauseous and the chest pain began. Sharp, stabbing pains that made it hard to breathe. I knew something was seriously wrong. I called 911 myself, barely managing to give them the parking garage location before I started losing consciousness. The last thing I remembered was the sound of sirens echoing off the concrete walls, and a paramedic's voice saying, "We need to get her to the hospital now." I don't remember the ambulance ride or arriving at the emergency room. I don't remember the doctors running tests or the nurses checking my vital signs. What I do remember is waking up 3 days later to the sound of medical equipment beeping around me, and the first person I saw wasn't my mother or father or sister. It was Dr. Sarah Williams, someone I'd gone to high school with who was now working at the hospital. She was checking my IV when I opened my eyes, and her face broke into a relieved smile when she saw I was conscious. "Madison, thank God you're awake. You gave us quite a scare," she said, adjusting something on the machine next to my bed. "How are you feeling?" My throat was dry, and my voice came out as barely a whisper. "What happened?" "You had a severe cardiac episode combined with dangerous dehydration and electrolyte imbalances," Sarah explained. "Your body was essentially shutting down. If you hadn't called 911 when you did..." She trailed off, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I looked around the sterile hospital room, taking in the flowers from my co-workers on the windowsill, the get well cards from people at my office, the balloons from my apartment building neighbours. What I didn't see was any sign of my family. "Sarah," I said slowly, "did anyone call my family?" Her expression shifted and she looked uncomfortable. "Madison, Yes, we called your emergency contacts multiple times. We spoke to your parents. And they didn't come?" Sarah sat down in the chair next to my bed, and I could see her struggling with how much to tell me. "Madison, I was here when Dr. Peterson made the call to your parents on the first night. Your condition was... We weren't sure you were going to make it through the night." My heart sank, but I had to know. "What did they say?" Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. "Your father answered the phone. Dr. Peterson explained that you were in critical condition and that they needed to come to the hospital immediately. He said it might be your last night and that they needed to be here." "And?" Your father said they couldn't come because your sister was walking her dog and they couldn't leave the dog alone. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. When Dr. Peterson explained again how serious your condition was, your mother got on the phone and said, "Madison always makes things seem worse than they are. She'll be fine. We'll try to come by this weekend if we have time." I stared at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just heard. My parents had been told I might die that night, and they'd chosen to stay home with Princess instead of coming to see me. Sarah, are you telling me that for 3 days, while I was unconscious and might have died, my family never came to see me? She nodded, tears in her eyes. Madison, I've been a doctor for 8 years, and I have never seen anything like this. We had nurses volunteering to sit with you during their breaks, because no one should be alone when they're fighting for their life. Your co-workers have been calling every few hours for updates. Your neighbour Mrs. Chen brought homemade soup and sat with you for 4 hours yesterday. I felt something breaking inside my chest, and it wasn't my heart condition. It was the last piece of hope I'd been carrying that my family loved me. Did they even ask how I was doing? Your mother called once on Tuesday to ask what visiting hours were, but when the nurse told her, she said it would be too difficult to arrange childcare for the dog. Childcare. For the dog. While I was fighting for my life, my parents were treating Princess like a human child who couldn't be left alone, and treating me like an inconvenience they'd deal with when it was more convenient. That revelation from Sarah hit me like a physical blow. For 3 days I had been unconscious, possibly dying, and my parents had prioritized a dog's comfort over their daughter's life. But what happened next would show me just how deep their indifference truly ran. On Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after I'd collapsed in that parking garage, I heard familiar voices in the hospital corridor. My heart actually jumped, not from my medical condition, but from a pathetic surge of hope that maybe finally they had come because they were worried about me. The door opened and there they were, Mom, Dad and Emma. But the first words out of my mother's mouth weren't, "Thank God you're alive," or "We were so worried." Instead, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh my goodness, it smells like disinfectant in here. Emma, honey, are you okay? You know how sensitive you are to chemical smells." Emma was indeed covering her nose with a designer scarf. "I can't stay long, Mom. This is making me nauseous, and I have Princess's training class at 4. Princess's training class. My sister couldn't stay long at my hospital bedside because she had to take her dog to training class. Dad was checking his watch impatiently. "How long do these visits usually take? We left Princess with the neighbour, but she gets anxious if we're gone too long." I stared at them in disbelief. I had been in the hospital for a week, and their primary concern was how long they'd have to stay before they could get back to the dog. "Madison, you look terrible," Mom said, finally focusing on me. "Have you been eating? You look so pale. Emma never looks this bad when she's sick." "I've been unconscious for 3 days," I said quietly. "Well, that explains it," she replied dismissively. "You always were a heavy sleeper, even as a child. Emma was such an early riser, so much more energetic." Emma was scrolling through her phone, apparently checking Princess's Instagram account, while I lay there trying to process the surreal nature of this conversation. "Look, Mom," she said, showing the phone screen. "Princess got over 1,000 likes on yesterday's post. She's becoming quite the influencer." "Oh, how wonderful," Mum gushed, leaning over to see the phone. "She's so photogenic. Madison, look at your niece." My niece. They were calling the dog my niece. Dr. Sarah Williams chose that moment to enter the room, and I watched her expression change as she took in the scene. Here I was, still connected to monitoring equipment, still weak from my ordeal, and my family was gathered around a phone looking at dog photos. "Good afternoon," Sarah said professionally. "You must be Madison's family. I'm Dr. Williams. I've been overseeing Madison's care." "Oh yes, hello," Dad said distractedly. "So when can she go home? We really can't stay long." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. "Mr. Henderson, your daughter suffered a severe cardiac episode that could have been fatal. She's going to need ongoing monitoring and—" "Cardiac episode?" Mum interrupted. "That sounds very dramatic. Madison has always been prone to exaggeration. Are you sure it wasn't just anxiety? She's always been the anxious type, not like Emma?" I watched Sarah's face grow cold. "Mrs. Henderson, I assure you this was not anxiety. Madison's heart stopped for nearly 2 minutes during her first night here. We had to resuscitate her." The room went quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe, finally, the gravity of the situation would hit them. Instead, Emma looked up from her phone with annoyance. "Well, obviously she's fine now, right? I mean, she's sitting up and talking. Princess gets more worked up when we leave her at the groomer." That's when I saw something change in Sarah's expression. She had been maintaining professional courtesy, but Emma comparing my near-death experience to a dog's grooming anxiety had pushed her over the edge. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. "Did you just compare your sister's cardiac arrest to a dog being groomed?" "Emma didn't mean anything by that," Mum said quickly. "She's just tired. She's been so worried about Princess. I mean, about Madison. It's been very stressful for all of us." "Stressful for you?" Sarah repeated. "Madison was alone for 3 days while fighting for her life. Where exactly were you that was so stressful?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we had responsibilities. Emma's dog needed care, and we couldn't just abandon our commitments." "Your commitments," Sarah said slowly, "were more important than your daughter possibly dying." "You're being very dramatic, Doctor," Mum said huffily. "Madison is clearly fine. She's always been attention-seeking. Even as a child, she'd fake being sick to get out of school." That was the final straw for Sarah, and honestly, it was the final straw for me too. I watched this woman, who had been a casual acquaintance in high school, show more protective instinct toward me in 5 minutes than my own family had shown in 24 years. "Mrs. Henderson," Sarah said, her voice now sharp with anger, "I have been practicing medicine for 8 years. I have seen families drive through blizzards to be with their loved ones who had minor injuries. I have seen parents sleep in hospital chairs for weeks when their children were sick. I have never, in my entire career, seen a family abandon their child during a life-threatening emergency because they were worried about a pet." Emma finally looked up from her phone. "Excuse me, but Princess isn't just a pet. She's family." "And what does that make Madison?" Sarah shot back. The question hung in the air like a challenge. I watched my parents and sister exchange glances, and I realized they didn't have an answer, or rather, they had an answer, but it wasn't one they wanted to say out loud in front of a witness. "Madison is Madison is our daughter, Mom finally said, but she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. Then why, Sarah continued, when I called you on Monday night and told you that Madison might not survive the night, did your husband tell me you couldn't come because Emma was walking her dog? Dad's face went red. That's not exactly what I said. Then what exactly did you say? Sarah demanded. I could see Dad scrambling for an explanation that didn't make him sound as heartless as he actually was. I said we couldn't come right then because Emma was out with Princess and we couldn't leave the dog alone. And when I explained that Madison was in critical condition and this could be her last night, what did your wife say? Mom looked trapped. I may have said that Madison tends to exaggerate medical situations. You said she'd be fine and you'd try to visit on the weekend if you had time, Sarah corrected. Your daughter was dying and you treated it like an optional social call. Emma finally put her phone away, apparently realizing that this conversation was not going the way they'd expected. Look, we're here now, aren't we? Madison is obviously fine. Can we just move past this? But I wasn't fine. I wasn't fine at all. And for the first time in my life, I had someone in my corner who could see that. No, Emma, I said quietly, my voice stronger than it had been all week. We can't just move past this. They all turned to look at me, surprised that I was speaking up. For 3 days, I was unconscious in this hospital bed. For 3 days, the doctors weren't sure if I would live or die. And for 3 days, my family was at home, more concerned about a dog than about me. My voice was getting stronger as I spoke. Do you have any idea what it's like to wake up after nearly dying and realize that no one who's supposed to love you even cared enough to be here? Madison, you're being overdramatic, Mum started. No, I interrupted, something I had never done before. I'm not. Sarah, tell them exactly what my condition was when I arrived here. Sarah looked at my parents with undisguised disgust. Madison arrived here in critical condition. Her heart was in arrhythmia, her blood pressure was dangerously low, and she was severely dehydrated. She went into cardiac arrest twice in the first 24 hours. We weren't sure she would survive, and even if she did, we were concerned about potential brain damage from oxygen deprivation. The room was silent. And where were you during those critical first days? Sarah continued. Madison's co-workers have been calling every few hours for updates. Her neighbours have been bringing food and flowers. The cleaning lady from her office building has visited twice. A woman she barely knows has shown more concern for Madison's well-being than her own family. Dad tried to interject. We didn't know it was that serious. I told you it was that serious, Sarah said, firmly. I specifically used the words life-threatening and critical condition and might not survive the night. What part of that did you not understand? Emma was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Okay, maybe we should have come sooner, but we're here now. Madison is fine, so can we just... I'm not fine, I said, and my voice carried a conviction that surprised even me. I almost died, and none of you cared. I have been your daughter, your sister for 24 years. And when I needed you most, you chose a dog over me. Princess isn't just a dog, Emma protested. And I'm not just nothing, I replied, but that's how you've treated me my entire life. Mum looked flustered. Madison? That's not true. We love you. Do you? I asked. Because love isn't just words, Mum. Love is actions. Love is showing up when someone needs you. Love is caring more about your child than about your convenience. We're here now, Dad said weakly. You're here now because you finally felt guilty. Or because someone told you it looked bad. Or because you realized people might start asking questions about why you weren't here. I was sitting up straighter now, feeling stronger than I had in days. But you're not here because you were worried about me. Even now, you've spent more time talking about Princess than asking how I'm doing. Sarah was watching this exchange with something that looked like pride, and her support gave me the courage to keep going. Emma, you complained about the hospital smell and checked your phone for dog photos before you even asked how I was feeling. Mum, you compared my appearance to Emma's instead of expressing any relief that I was alive. Dad, you asked when I could go home before you even said hello. They were all staring at me now, and I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they tried to figure out how to regain control of this conversation. Madison, you're clearly upset and not thinking clearly, Mum said in her condescending voice. This medical situation has been traumatic, and you're not processing things rationally. But for the first time in my life, I was processing things with perfect clarity. I'm processing things exactly right, Mum. I'm seeing our family dynamics for what they really are. I'm the spare child, the afterthought, the one you keep around out of obligation rather than love. I looked at each of them in turn. And I'm done with it. Done with what? Emma asked nervously. Done trying to earn your love. Done accepting crumbs of attention while you give Princess a feast of affection. Done pretending that this is normal or acceptable. Sarah stepped forward. I think your family should leave now. Madison needs rest, and this conversation is clearly upsetting her. We're not finished talking, Dad said firmly. Yes, we are, I replied. We've been finished for years. I just didn't realise it until now. That night, after my family left, Sarah came back to check on me. She pulled up a chair beside my bed and sat down. Madison, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but what I witnessed today was not normal family behaviour. I looked at her gratefully. Thank you for standing up for me. No one has ever done that before. That's exactly my point, she said gently. Everyone deserves someone in their corner. The fact that you've gone 24 years without that is heartbreaking. We talked for over an hour that night. Sarah helped me understand that the way my family treated me wasn't my fault, wasn't something I deserved, and wasn't something I had to continue accepting. She told me about patients she'd seen who had cut toxic family members out of their lives and how much healthier and happier they'd become. You have a choice to make, Madison, she said before leaving. You can keep trying to earn love from people who clearly aren't capable of giving it. Or you can build a life surrounded by people who value you for who you are. That night, I made my choice. I spent the next 3 days planning. Sarah helped me understand my medical situation and what I would need for ongoing care. She also helped me understand my options in terms of medical privacy. My family had no legal right to information about my condition or treatment, and I could revoke their access to everything. On Sunday afternoon, Sarah discharged me from the hospital. But I didn't go home to my apartment. Instead, I went to an extended stay hotel across town, one that allowed me to pay week by week while I figured out my next steps. I had already decided what I was going to do, but I needed time to plan it carefully. This wasn't going to be a dramatic confrontation or an angry outburst. This was going to be a clean, final break, the kind that left no room for misinterpretation or future manipulation. Over the next 4 days, I got my affairs in order. I spoke to my supervisor about working remotely from a different city. I researched apartments in other states. I opened new bank accounts that my family couldn't access. I changed my emergency contacts to Sarah and my supervisor instead of my parents. Most importantly, I wrote a letter, not an angry rant or a list of grievances, but a clear, calm explanation of what had happened and what I was choosing to do about it. On Thursday morning, exactly 2 weeks after I'd collapsed in that parking garage, I drove to my parents' house one final time. I knew they wouldn't be home. Thursday was Emma's day to take Princess to the dog park, and my parents always went along to help socialise her with other dogs. I used my key to let myself in and went straight to my old bedroom, which had been converted into Princess's room, complete with a custom dog bed, toy chest, and wall-mounted feeding station. I placed my letter on the pillow of the bed where my parents would be sure to find it when they tucked Princess in that night. Then I left my house key on the kitchen counter, took one last look around the home where I'd never really belonged, and walked out the door for the final time. The letter was simple but complete. Dear Mom, Dad, and Emma. When you read this, I will be gone. Not gone as in dead. Though that was a real possibility last week when I was alone in the hospital while you stayed home with Princess. Gone as in choosing to remove myself from your lives the same way you removed yourselves from mine. I want to be clear about what happened in case you've already started rewriting the story in your minds. On March 28th, I collapsed from a severe cardiac episode. I was rushed to the hospital unconscious and in critical condition. The doctors called you and told you I might not survive the night. Your response was that you couldn't come because Emma was walking Princess. For 3 days, I was unconscious and fighting for my life. For 3 days, you chose to stay home with a dog rather than be with your daughter. When you finally visited a week later, you spent more time discussing Princess's Instagram followers than asking about my recovery. This isn't about one incident, though. This is about 24 years of being treated like I'm less important than everyone and everything else in your lives. I have spent my entire life trying to earn love that you freely give to a dog, and I'm done. I'm not writing this to hurt you or to get revenge. I'm writing this to explain why you will never hear from me again. I'm starting over somewhere else with a new name and a new life, surrounded by people who see me as more than an afterthought. I don't expect you to understand this decision because understanding it would require you to acknowledge how you've treated me. And I don't think you're capable of that level of self-reflection. Please don't look for me. Please don't try to contact me. And please don't pretend you miss me, because we both know you won't notice I'm gone until you need something from me. I hope Princess lives a long and happy life. I hope she never experiences the loneliness of being unloved by the people who are supposed to love her most. Goodbye, Madison P.S. I've changed all my emergency contacts and medical information. If anything happens to me in the future, you won't be called. I thought you'd appreciate not being inconvenienced. I left that letter on Princess's bed because I wanted them to find it in the place that symbolized everything wrong with our family dynamic. The dog had a dedicated room in the house where I'd grown up, while I had become nothing more than an occasional visitor. By the time they found that letter, I was already 3 states away, driving toward a new city where no one knew me as the unloved daughter, the spare child, the afterthought. I was just Madison, or rather, I was about to become Sarah Madison, named after the one person who had stood up for me when it mattered most. I knew that when my parents read that letter, when they realized I had actually left permanently, they would be shocked. But I also knew they wouldn't be heartbroken the way parents should be when they lose a child. They would be inconvenienced. They would be embarrassed if people ask questions. They would be confused about why I was making such a big deal out of everything. And maybe, just maybe, in a quiet moment when no one else was around, they might finally understand what they had lost. But by then, it would be too late. I was done being the unloved daughter. I was done begging for scraps of affection from people who had more love for a golden retriever than for their own child. I was done accepting a life where I didn't matter. For the first time in 24 years, I was choosing myself.